And what's up, everybody? This is King Von Jr. Welcome to another episode of the Victorious Ones podcast, the place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. Of course, I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media, on Twitter at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow, of course, you can follow the show's Twitter page at Victory Pod One. Excuse me. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Plex Talk Radio, of course, on Mondays at 6 p.m., hosted by a friend of the program, Mike Knox. And there's a whole lot that I really have to, really have to get into. You know what I mean? First and foremost, welcome to 2026. It's been a while. Of course, I had to recover, because my voice wasn't holding up very well on that last episode. Excuse me. But yeah, of course, new year, new podcast, new year, new episode, if you will. I know that of course, last week the reason why I wasn't on was because my church was having the New Year's revival, and so of course, I definitely had to go for that. You know what I mean? And speaking of church, I got a little something to get off my chest a little bit later about that. But yeah, like I say, of course, the New Year's revival, it was amazing. And also, Stranger Things, had their series finale. So congratulations to Stranger Things for having the fifth and final season. Great send off. I definitely like the Purple Rain, Prince, reference. Just in terms of just the theme of that finale. You know what I mean? Could have been a little bit better, executed a little bit better, probably so. But I think also one of the things that kind of took some points away was how much time it had taken. How long it took for them to finally launch this last season. But yeah, they were talking about spinoffs, but I don't really see too much of a spinoff with that. I feel as though, but yeah, like I said, I feel as though it served its purpose. That they told all the stories that they need to tell. And not much to really say about that. And so, like I said, as far as that, and and matter of fact, I know, I'll say it like this. Of course, recently there's been a lot of talk. I ain't really, really want to, get into this with the podcast, but I might as well. Lately, as we all know, the timeline's been blowing up because Drewski, did that skit about the church, right? And so, there are different perspectives to have about that. So, for me, I wouldn't say that he was the problem per se. He's the least of my concern. As far as I'm concerned, it's more so, a mirror. It's just like holding the mirror, for people to see, to see their reflection. And there are a lot of people who don't like what they see. When you see your reflection, you could do, one of two things. You could either accept what you see and make changes, or you could fight against. You could just, fight over it, and not, and just be in denial. Either you're gonna accept what you see or be in denial of what you see. And there are people who accept, that goes on. And there are others who are in denial, and so I will say this. Most importantly, it's got to be more accountability when it comes to that aspect, right? In terms of, in terms of that particular, behavior. And so he wasn't mocking Christianity, itself. He wasn't mocking God or anything like that, but more so mocking, the foolishness, of these preachers and and pastors and prophets who were grifters and the people who like to play in God's face and play in your face as well. So I wouldn't say that that he was like it wasn't so much like I said, I feel as though I've already expressed everything at live, what I say online, but yeah, I think it's more so just holding up a mirror, and there are people who don't like their reflection. He's holding up a mirror to a lot of foolishness. He was holding up a mirror to to just like I said, the grifting and scamming and people misappropriate funds, and just just spit off a bunch of foolishness, right? And so this, and the thing is, that's why I'm grateful for for the church that I go to, for the pastor that that I serve under, who preaches the word, who serves the community, who loves the people, who challenges us to grow, who's unapologetic when it comes to teaching, right? So, I don't really talk too much about, what I believe in a whole lot on here, but, people know, but, of course, and plus it really struck a chord. So it's just like, what, might as well say something about it. On the flip side, for every grifter that you see, there is a giver, there's a shepherd, so if you don't like what goes on at one particular church, I can just about guarantee you that not too far from there is a church that's authentic, that is, that's Bible believing, that that teaches and preaches, what the scripture says, right? So like I said, for everyone, for every one of those places that's got a lot of foolishness, they're right around the corner, like I say, that there's a church that fits what you need, that a place where God gives you what you need, so I would say don't use that as an excuse, don't use that as discouragement. I'll just say, like I said, don't let that run you away. You know what I mean? Like so, for for every one of those places that's that's got that type of stuff going on. That there's always a place that is, like I said, that preaches God's word unapologetically, the way it needs to be preached. There are churches that are doing the Great Commission, fulfilling God's mandate, being a light to the community, light to the world itself, right? So I know it sounds cliche, but it's possible. There are places out there they're like that, So I'll just say, just seek God for direction. That's all it is. That's all I have to say. Seek God for direction, for where He's leading you, and see where you fit in to that larger puzzle. Because the thing is, I don't want to sound like preaching. I might as well. But the thing about it is that each of us has gifts, and it's just, and the thing is, there's a place where we can use those gifts. So, bottom line, that's my PSA. Don't let that deter you, because because the thing is, God has a purpose and plan for each and every one of us, and there is room for us to do something. And like I said, and there are places that will teach us and feed us, the word that we need to hear. So yeah, so that's pretty much it right there. I just had to get that off, because that's definitely a huge talking point right And so now, on a lighter note, we go into these NFL playoffs. And this past weekend, the wild card round just wrapped up. And I will say that out of those 6 games, I got about 4 of them right. Go 4 out of 6. So here's a recap. The LA Rams defeat the Panthers 34-31. Then we had the Bears defeat the Packers, surprisingly, in a comeback, 31-27. Then we had the Buffalo Bills defeat the Jacksonville Jaguars, 27-24. We also had the San Francisco 49ers defeat the Philadelphia Eagles, 23-19. We also had the New England Patriots defeat the Chargers, 16-3. I don't even want to call them the LA Chargers, 16-3. And then we also have the Houston Texans demolish the Pittsburgh Steelers 30-6, and what looks like could be Aaron Rodgers' last game. It was certainly, it was certainly Mike Tomlin's last game, because right after that, he ended up stepping down as the Steelers head coach instead of letting them, instead of letting the organization throw him out the door. If anything, he stepped down himself. So so out of those games, I got 4 out of 6. So when it came to my predictions, the ones I got right were the Rams, the Bills, the Niners, and the Patriots. I'm good on that. So now, for the divisional round, this upcoming weekend, we have the Bills versus the Broncos, the Niners versus the Seahawks, Texans versus the Patriots, and Rams versus the Bears. So there you have it. That is your NFL playoff picture. And so now when it comes to the world of wrestling, we see that there have been several call-ups. So we see that the main roster is getting more loaded with NXT talent. And to see this influx of this many NXT call-ups, and just my thing is, it's all about the next man up. NXT is next. NXT next man up, if you will. So we're seeing that right now. We've seen, obviously, Lash Legend join the main roster as team, tag teaming with Nia Jax. Carmelo Hayes, is in the main obviously on the main roster, for about a minute, and now he's officially the United States champion. Congratulations to him. Excuse me. Trick Williams, like I said, not long after Lash joined, Trick is now on the main roster, and now recently, Obafemi just vacated the NXT Championship, and now he is on the main roster. And also, not just that, Javon Evans, the quote-unquote young OG, is now on the main roster, and he was officially, Adam Pearce, right on the spot, sign him to Raw. He signed a contract right on the spot during the show. Is now he's officially on the Red Brand on Raw. Obviously, Trick of course, Trick joined Lash on SmackDown. Smart move, of course. You know what I mean? Especially since they since he put a ring on it. You know what I mean? So you definitely want to of course definitely want to be with your lady. Just like Montez and Bianca. You know what I mean? So the locker room is a whole lot different now. They're not doing like I said, they're not having spouses away from each other. It's, stuff like that. They're not doing that. That's one thing I like. But yeah, that aside, like I say, of course, Trick, rightfully so, is on SmackDown. You know what I mean? Like, as far as that's concerned. And so, like I said, in terms of where Obafemi, I think they said he's on Raw. I know Javon Evans joined Raw. Matter of fact, yeah. And I like this because, as dominant as Obafemi is, the last thing you wanted was for him on his way out to drop the NXT title. I mean, it's one thing for him to have lost to Ricky Saints, but eventually got it back. And so with someone of his caliber, you don't want him to lose that many times to somebody who's not that believable. Obafemi is the future of WWE, and we might as well say the future is now. He vacated the championship at the end of NXT New Year's Eve, following his title defense against Leon Slater. And so Obafemi joins Asuka as the only two NXT champions to vacate to join the main roster without getting pinned. They vacated their titles to join the main roster. And the thing is, it's been said that the Oba's, work, his matches and his presentation have impressed many within the company. Hence, that's why he had that match with Cody at Saturday Night's Main Event during, like I said, during Cena's last match. Like I said, that's why, like I said, he was in the ring with Cody like that. And he more than held his own. And so clearly he's viewed as a major part of the company's present and future, rightfully so. So I feel as though Braun Breaker definitely has a run for his money. And so Fightful Select, pretty much most notably probably reported by Sean Ross Sapp, more than likely. Fightful Select reports that that Femi is expected to debut near the top of the card. I mean, why not? He was just on Saturday Night's Main Event last month against the now former WWE champion. So it only makes sense for him to be thrown right into that mix. Matter of fact, yeah, Sean Ross Sapp was the one who confirmed, which was obvious, that that Femi vacating the NXT Championship was due to imminent plans on the main roster. So immediately they see money. So in my estimation, I feel as though, if you are going to, bring Obafemi up like that, bring these big NXT names up like that, let them, debut, let them start off with a bang, let them come out swinging, let them come out with a bang. I mean, look what happened, look what happened with Kevin Owens. His very first night on Raw, he beats John Cena. You know what I mean? It happens. I want to say Finn Balor even got a W over Roman. So it happens. So if it happens, for people like that, why not, let it happen for someone who's even more believable, such as Obafemi, right? And so, in terms of, because I know that Mike and I just got finished talking about this on Monday, in terms of just the state of, the NXT call-ups, especially, state of, the black NXT wrestlers, if you will, right? And so when you look at someone like Obafemi, you look at the likes of him, Trick Williams, Lash Legend. They have the marketability, they have the image, they have the aesthetic, and they certainly have what it takes in the ring. Lash has been growing by leaps and bounds. Same with Trick, right? But when it comes to them, the aura, outweighs what they do in the ring. Obafemi, you have a combination of both. You know, you have the aura and the work rate are pretty much almost neck and neck, hand in hand. You know, he is, in my estimation, I feel as though he is what Vince McMahon saw in Brock Lesnar, you know, back in like 2002, 2003. You know, Oba gives off that vibe. He is a throwback to that. And I feel as though with Lesnar, you know, being on his way out the door, his career's on his last legs. So I feel as though if there's anybody who could be the career killer for him, I feel as though, you know, it would be someone like Oba Finn. You know, if they're not gonna go with, like I said, you know, typically gonna go with Gunther, but even more than that, I can see Oba. Even though, you know, it would be, you know, it would be nice to have seen, you know, let's see, it would have been nice to have seen, you know, Brock versus Gunther. You know, before, you know, all that, you know, before all that, you know, that Vince scandal, you know, got in the way and scrapped all that back in like 2024. We very well could have had that at WrestleMania 40, you know, but because, you know, Brock wanted to be old freak nasty, you know, he ends up getting scrapped from the Royal Rumble and replaced by Braun Breaker. But, you know, it's neither here nor there. So, like I said, and then not only that, I guess I'm just giving my evaluations, if you will, when it comes to the NXT talent that are now getting these call-ups to the main roster. I mean, NXT is getting gutted, is starting to get depleted at this point. You know, thoughts and prayers and hats off to Shawn Michaels right now. You know, because now he's got to really improvise and really just, you know, and just really pull a rabbit out of the hat, if you will, and really make the most out of what he still has. And I believe he can. And I believe he will. You know, I'm a firm believer in HBK. You know, I'm a firm believer in what he's capable of. And you know, but you gotta admit, this has definitely been quite a few gut punches for him right now. And Jordan Grace has been called up as well. She's going to be on SmackDown, and we saw, you know, just recently, the program between, at least like the stare down between her and Jade Cargill. That right there is money. Jordan versus Jade is money, and also, also recently, like I said, matter of fact, let me slow down. I'm gonna go ahead and backtrack on, on stuff that I didn't cover. So last Monday on Raw, they did the in honor of Stranger Things. They had the Stranger Things, theme going on. Saying chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, yada, right? So I thought that was pretty cool. They even had the set like Stranger Things, you name it. The only thing that's missing was that they didn't have the cast in the audience. Imagine seeing Dustin or Steve in the front row. They would have added extra touch. And of course, Raw took place last week. Of course, in the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and there was, I guess, there's a Stranger Things theme apparently, because there are a lot of title changes. So we saw Rhea Ripley and Io Sky become the new women's tag team champions. Congratulations to them on that. Right. And then we also saw Becky Lynch. Thankfully, she finally reclaimed the women's IC title against Maxine Dupree. I couldn't see Maxine as a belief in, it's not a shade on women's wrestling at all whatsoever. But I'm a realist. It was hard for me to see Maxine have a lengthy title reign, especially she's super duper greener than the Hulk, right? But yet people wanted to give Jade a hard time, right? So why not keep the same energy with Maxine? But I digress. As a matter of fact, Unreal, they just, like I said, matter of fact, I'm going to talk about, matter of fact, I'm going to talk about Unreal, get my thoughts about it even next week. So, but I'm just giving a recap, right? So those are some of the main things. And also, of course, last week we had Braun Breaker, Braun Breaker versus CM Punk, and of course, CM Punk being the troll that he is, might as well call him CM Troll. He came out, wearing the varsity jacket with his name on it, and it was a reference to the Steiner brothers. And there are people that I know who didn't really get the reference, kind of went over their head because they weren't really following the Steiner brothers like that. But CM Punk was being a troll. And the thing is, when it comes to CM Punk's brand, CM Punk's level of trolling, I'm pretty sure there's some people that they're watching this and they know what I'm talking about. I've had to explain this on on Twitter Space before. The thing with CM Punk, when it comes to his level of trolling, it is like, for certain people who didn't really follow him and stuff like that, Punk with those references is like a comedian from the 70s or the 80s who tries to translate those same jokes, but they don't quite land, with the newer audience. That's pretty much what it is. So for people that didn't really understand. So, long story short, CM Punk ends up retaining the championship. Personally, I kind of wanted Braun Breaker to win, but I digress. And so, there are people who, bro, hey, what's up? Whoever that is, what's up? What's up? But yeah, but the thing about it is that there's still an element of Braun Breaker that still needs a little bit of fine tuning, if you will. And just recently on Raw, like I said, recently on Raw, of course he ends up, getting quote unquote suspended indefinitely, but Paul Heyman, he's clearly going to be an advocate fight against that, and there's still quite a bit of polishing for Braun Breaker, but considering what they have to offer, or not too much left right now, pretty much that's kind of what they have to kind of deal with right now, but so prospects ain't prospect, and so but yeah, like I said, as far as that, I don't want to sound like I'm jumping back and forth all over, but I'll just kind of give it a little bit of a recap. But also another thing I wanted to talk about was back to the NXT upside. We saw that we also saw that Trick Williams had only two people said whatever. Anyway, but whatever, let's of course, but anyway, so when it comes to Trick Williams and Randy Orton, I like the prospect of it. I like the upside, and I know Trick kind of got nervous and accidentally knocked the mic out of Randy's hand, and it hit a fan by mistake. And you could tell the trick broke character. He said, you know, but you know, it's just like one of those things. You know, you just butterflies. Got a little nervous. You know, it's first time being on the main roster. You know, a much larger audience and fan base, bright lights, whatever you name it, right? And not only that, but he's in the ring with the bona fide legend and future Hall of Famer Randall Keith, 14-time champion, right? So you are standing. Subscribe for you. Thank you very much. But yeah, like son. But like I said, like I said, thank you very much for those that are watching on Twitter and YouTube. I appreciate that. But yeah, you know, it's just that, you know, I like what they're doing with this, you know, and you know, like I said, you know, I like that, you know, that Trick's kind of hitting the ground running, and they're putting him in a program like this. So even if he catches an L, he could still be victorious in the midst of a defeat. You can still win in the face of losing. Shawn Michaels proved that. Look how many times he's caught an L when he came back during that second run, right? So he was still seen as a champion even in the midst of defeat. So that could be Trick's situation, you know, but not for long, of course. But I like that being his first storyline, his first program, his first feud. Let it be. Let it be. And I like Trick's line where he said, you know, this is not 2006, this is 2026. I said, all right then. I'm impressed. I'm highly impressed. You know. And also, I want to say congratulations to Drew McIntyre for winning the WWE Championship. And I was celebrating, you know, of course, last night on Turnbuckle Talk with Mimi from Black Wrestling, along with many others. And you know, I mean, shoot, she had to be celebrating. She was, you know, saying that she slept better than she'd ever probably slept in a long time. You know, especially since Drew's the champion. You know, I'm happy for her. I'm happy for her. You know what I mean? I told her. And but yeah, you know, and the thing is, Drew deserves it because you know, he had, you know, obviously 2 years ago at WrestleMania 40, he had the carpet pulled out from under him by way of, you know, because of CM Punk. I mean, but at the same time, Drew was trolling Punk anyway, so kind of brought that on himself, you know. But you know, so like that 15 seconds of fame was gone in an instant because of Damian Priest's cash in. So I'll be right back on. But yeah, like I said, you know, Drew is more than deserving because of the work that he's put in since he lost that title. You know, especially, you know, of course, most notably the feud with CM Punk. That is what really, really, really elevated his stock to an unbelievable level. You know, and plus, the last time Drew had a significant world title reign, nobody was in the audience. Everybody was at home because of the pandemic. So, so the thing is, like I said, like I said, I'm glad he got it, and so, so I think this is going to mean even more for him moving forward. So as far as that, like I said, of course, like I said, hats off to him. And so, backtracking. And so, like I said, as far as that, you know, of course, that was my dad in the background. But of course, a side note as far as that, for those that aren't aware, shirt today is LL Cool J's birthday, so just wanted to wear this in honor of the living legend. But more on that later. So like I said, um, it's great to see Drew, in that element, and and of course we see that the Usos, of course have reunited, and now they are tag team champions as they take the belts off of AJ Styles and Dragon Lee. I'm just giving a little recap, from the last time. Quite a bit of catching up to do right now, and I believe I've covered more than enough ground. So it clearly shows that when it comes to Jey Uso, it shows that this Yeet Mania experiment kind of came backfired, kind of blew up in everybody's face, and of course, I wouldn't say that there's so much, like, my analysis of Jey Uso is not from a place of internet hate. It is being realistic, being honest, and as I've said before, that WWE Unreal documentary did not do him any favors either. Unfortunately, there were certain blemishes that it kind of exposed, and I'm pretty sure that him going on that drunk rant from Cena's last match that night, didn't really put him in the best light either. So here we are, back to what he knows best as a tag team wrestler. Fans, of course, are still doing, down since day one type of thing. Even though him and his brother, are back as a tag team. So so the thing is, I would say some of the internet is kind of overboard, but at the same time, let's just call a spade a spade. In Vince McMahon's universe, Jey Uso would not sniff a world title. Let's just call it what it is. In Vince McMahon's universe, even though we're not there anymore, Jey Uso would not have, as a singles wrestler, of course, Jey Uso would not have a 90 on no WWE 2K. He would not have no higher rating than no Kurt Angle, no Shawn Michaels, or Macho Man, or none of them. Let's call it what it is. Clearly he was, a merch mover because of a catchphrase, but outside of that, there was, a lot left to be desired. I think it kind of caught up to him. So now, back to being the legendary tag team wrestler. And there's nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever. But yeah. And also we had Gunther versus AJ Styles, the winner of the match, the ring general himself, Gunther. And it kind of surprises me that they, pulled the trigger so early with AJ versus Gunther, especially since this is AJ's, last year. This is last year's, he's a full-time wrestler and all that type of stuff. This is his farewell run, right? And I would think since Gunther has this gimmick, this label of being the career killer, you saw a career killer, I would think that they would have held off, held all this stuff off until AJ's final match, just like they did with John Cena. And of course, last night or Monday, Gunther, goes on to win. And back to doing a little other backtracking right now, kind of freestyle a little bit. Speaking of the Usos, during Raw in Brooklyn, I want to give a shout out to those wrestling girls for being part of that entrance. Like I said, as far like for the Usos coming through the audience. So if you pause, like I said, if you look carefully and you pause, you definitely see them. Shout out to Krista B and Queen PR from those wrestling girls, friends of the program, of course. But yeah, like I said, just kind of wanted to get that out the way. And like I said, as far as that, I would say that like some pretty much as far as those things are concerned. And we also saw Liv Morgan and Roxanne Perez become the #1 contenders for Rio's tag team championships. And we see that that this feud has been boiling over between Raquel Rodriguez and Stephanie Valkyrie. And I like the direction that Raquel is going in, and how she's become the powerhouse that she's meant to be. And she's really taking that by force. In more ways than one. And so, and also another thing that that I get off my chest. Can't escape it, because there was a lot of talk about Chris Jericho making his return. Excuse me. There are a lot of rumors about Jericho making a comeback during that Raw in Brooklyn. But I knew that wasn't going to happen, because obviously he was on tour doing something with Fozzy. His AEW contract just ran up or something. But I think they're saving that for the Royal Rumble. But as far as I'm concerned, the main thing I want to see from Jericho is a retirement run. Retirement program where it ends with either Gunther or Obafemi putting him down. More than likely, I think they're going to end up going with Gunther. As long as Jericho gets put down and goes to the Hall of Fame and rides off to the sunset, for me, that's all that matters. So I was not, getting my hopes up and all this crazy stuff, all this crazy stuff about Jericho, Y2J, and all this other. I know there's the nostalgia factor. Don't get me wrong, right? But so much of Jericho's aura has worn off to the point where it's become just downright musty, to be honest with you. From his online behavior, the things he says, the things he said about the company, I don't want to make this about politics, but even when it comes to some of his political views and standpoints, Jericho pre-2020, cool, whatever. 2020 afterwards, that shine has worn off. Of course, I never negate his accomplishments. They are what they are. We know what he has done, for the business, and all that, right? You can admire his accomplishments all you want to, you know, but it doesn't quite hit the same. And so I firmly believe, look, I welcome Jericho to come back, you know, um, for the sake of, having this finale and all this other type of stuff. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, he wasn't around for Cena's retirement tour. You know what I mean? So they'll never cross paths again. Um, so unless Cena's a Hall of Fame presenter, whatever, who knows? But yeah, like in terms of this, Jericho, all right, whatever, you know, as long as it's, as long as he's doing his retirement farewell, goes to the Hall of Fame, and that's it. So that is my sense about that. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything else. I believe I've covered as much ground as I possibly could. So we saw that Gunther defeated AJ Styles. Io and Rhea celebrated winning the tag titles. We have Penta and Dragon Lee versus Bronson Reed, Austin Theory. And of course we saw that CM Punk called out Finn Balor. And of course we saw Javon Evans versus Bravo Americana. The winner of that match, Javon Evans. And like I said, CM Punk. It really, he's just calling Finn out. He just wants to bring the absolute best out of Finn Balor. What Finn is more than capable of, rather than, pretty much rather than carrying the bags for Judgment Day. You know what I mean? So Punk was just basically telling Finn, like, dude, it was a very, very straightforward segment. He looked at him. He's like, dude, I know that you can do more than this. Punk, definitely taking shots at him. Said he's been waiting for Finn to take his shot, but he's been too busy playing video games and shining Liv Morgan's shoes. He said he wanted to put the title on the line against Balor tonight. But, and of course, Finn Balor said he wanted to wait until next week. When they're in his home country of Ireland, Punk agreed, but he said he will still be the champion after next week. So it's official that we will see. And of course, Monday Night Raw was at 2:00 in Germany. And next week is going to be at 3:00 in Ireland. And so, of course, it's official. We're going to see CM Punk versus Finn Balor for the Royal Heavyweight Championship. And so, like I said, Liv and Roxanne, number one contenders. And clearly saw somewhere apparently Judgment Day is going to be on its last legs. And as in my estimation, I think that's for the better. Like I said, Kel attack Stephanie. And of course, we said Bronson Reed and Austin Theory versus Dragon Lee and Penta. And of course, Dragon Lee and Penta won by DQ, thanks to Braun Breaker. And of course, Adam Pearce won't go to suspend him indefinitely. And last but not least, of course, we had AJ Styles versus Gunther, and the winner of that match, the ring general Gunther. So as far as that's concerned, and that's pretty much it right there. And so far, like I said, my main concern was the state of NXT's future on the main roster, and I believe the upside outweighs the downside. You know what I mean? Their trajectory, like I said, I am optimistic about their trajectory. That's all I have to say. And so that pretty much does it for for tonight's episode. And so before I go, I'd like to give birthday shout outs. And so of course on January 11th, the Queen of Hip Hop and R&B, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer herself, Mary J. Blige, turned 55. Of course, my cousin, shout out to my cousin Serena, she turned 38. Queen PR from those wrestling girls turned 36. On January 12th, human highlight film NBA Hall of Famer and Hawks legend Dominique Wilkins turned 66. January 14th, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, hip hop legend LL Cool J turned 58. Carl Weathers would have turned 78 on January 14th. January 15th, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Would have turned 97. Shane McMahon turns 56. And of course, on January 16th, Debbie Allen turns 76. Sade turns 67. Aaliyah would have turned 47. And of course, on January 17th, on January 17th, Muhammad Ali would have turned 84. Of course, Betty White would have turned 104. Dwayne Wade turns 44. Jim Carrey turns 64. James Earl Jones would have turned 95. Michelle Obama turned 62. Ray J. Like I said, Michelle Obama turns 62. Of course, Ray J turns 45. Joy Taylor turns 39. And on January 18th, David Ruffin would turn 85. Ted DiBiase, of course, turns 72. And on January 12th, I almost forgot, Howard Stern turned 72 as well. And so of course, that's it for the birthdays. And before I go, I'd like to give a word of wisdom, and it is that God has given you the DNA of being more than a conqueror. And you are victorious because, of course, you're victorious because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in last place. Please make sure to listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that you download podcasts. You can also watch subscribe by way of YouTube, youtube.com/Avant West Virginia. Please make sure like and subscribe for more great content. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for listening. And may this day be the very best day of your life.